Happy Monday. Welcome to Burning Tree Program Spotlight. I'm Eric Button. I do family support work for us, and I am a business development representative. Burning Tree Programs is a family-owned organization that was started by David Elliott back in 1999. His initial creation was Burning Tree Ranch. Burning Tree Ranch is a long-term residential treatment center for men and women who are chronic relapsers. Average client has been to treatment several previous attempts and have failed. We work with men and women, and the length of stay is anywhere from 8 to 14 months of residential with a year of transitions. In 2004, David Elliott created Burning Tree Lodge. Burning Tree Lodge is located in Elgin, Texas, outside of Austin. It was rebranded a couple years ago when Peter Pirano came on as the chief operating officer. It is now known as Renewal Lodge by Burning Tree. Renewal Lodge is a men and women's substance use disorder treatment center with a modality of clinically advanced mindfulness approach to the 12 steps. And it is an in-network provider with all major US-based insurance providers, health insurance, that is. Just this year, early part of the year, David Elliott teamed up with Jessica and Josh Slay, and they brought back to life Awakenings Hill Country. Awakenings Hill Country is an all-women's treatment center for substance use disorder. It is a mindfulness approach to the steps as renewal, and it's also a very trauma informed program. It's women helping women. It's an in-network provider also. And in Tucson, Arizona, where David Elliott gained his freedom from addiction, is Burning Tree West. Burning Tree West is a young adult program with a collegiate track. Burning Tree West also offers some sober living environment beds for men and women. So, without any further delay, Gary Kaufman arranged for us to highlight recovered connections in Frisco, Texas. It's a men's sober living environment, two locations in Frisco. And Mr. David Greenleaf, welcome to Burning Tree Program Spotlight. How are you?
Good, Eric. Good to see you. How's things going?
Fantastic. I really like that shirt. It says recovered.
Yeah, I might have cheated a little bit with another facility that has sober across their shirt. I figured I'd throw recovered across my shirt.
Well, what does recovered mean to you?
Gosh, it's meant the biggest thing in my life for a long time. You know, I'm 52 years old. I've been sober 26 years. So basically half my life I've been in recovery, and for many years thought I would always be stuck, you know, kind of suffering with this craving and mental problem that would convince me to drink again. And, you know, since I worked the 12 steps from the big book and had the experience of becoming recovered, everything in my life has changed, and it stayed changed for a very long time. And that's what our whole thing is about.
Yeah. what actions do you, if you don't mind me asking, what actions do you engage in on a daily basis to ensure that you stay recovered?
Well, I'm extremely active in the fellowship, obviously, going to meetings pretty much every day. When I have an opportunity, I'll go multiple times in a day. And I do all of the things that the big book prescribes, daily prayer and meditation to start my day, reading AA literature, talking with other alcoholics, carrying the message, trying to be of service to people, obviously the meetings, and then, at the end of my day, reviewing my day, doing an inventory and making sure that I don't owe amends, or also giving myself credit for the things I've done good for people. That's one of the things I missed for many years in recovery by not doing a written inventory at night, was giving myself the opportunity to see, hey, you know what? I did do some things wrong today, but I did a lot of things right. And
Right.
so I'm very religious about what the big book says to do.
So I know Gary Kaufman, who is one of my coworkers at Burning Tree. I know you guys have known each other for quite some time.
Oh, yeah.
You met Gary in the fellowship. Is that correct?
Right. I was 5 or 6 years sober, mid to late 90s. And Gary came strolling in from California, and he was something. I mean, first thing I found out about him is that he was a solid gold dancer. And I was like, all right, I got to get to know this guy. And he had a great story, and we hit it off. And we had a little posse of guys at the Trinity group, and one of the big groups in Dallas back then that's now since closed. And, he made me believe that people with long-term sobriety could have fun. And I needed that. I was very serious early on in sobriety, and I'll tell you why I needed to be. I needed to be very serious because I had some very serious consequences and problems, and alcoholism nearly killed me. But then I started to loosen up after a few years and realized that, this concept of living life like a loose garment, that I needed to figure out what that meant, Yeah. And Gary certainly wears life like a loose garment. In fact, Gary walks around like he's streaking sometimes. He wears life so loose, which I love about him. It's what we all love about Gary.
David, what I pick up on just visiting with you right now, I can feel your passion for being of service. What I want to know is, at what time did you think, I want to help more men? And when did you, what tell us the path of you discovering that you wanted to open up a men's sober living home in Frisco, Texas, and call it Recovered Connections?
Well, we have to go back a little in my story. I won't go talk about it too long, but I got sober in sober living. The Oxford House in Dallas. It was the Rosemont House. It was by White Rock Lake. I was there for 8.5 months, and I had been trying to get sober since 1987 and failing. And I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg, but I was finally willing to do what had been suggested to me many times, which is to go into sober living, because I, like you described out at Burning Tree, I was one of those people who had tried and not been able to get sober. And so sober living for me was the next step in accountability. And so I got sober, worked the steps, and did the deal while living in that house. And not coincidentally, it was the beginning of long-term sobriety. So flash forward, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I sponsor tons of people. And as I've gotten older, I sponsor older people. I still like to think I'm young at heart, but the truth is I'm a grandfather now and in my 50s. And my sponsees have progressively gotten older and older, to where I sponsor a lot of guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And when these guys were going into sober living, they were going into great places. There's so much good sober living in the Metroplex, really. I mean, I didn't do this because I thought someone needed to do sober living right because it wasn't being done right, because it is. There's great facilities all around me. But a lot of these guys were going into houses where everyone else there was under the age of 25, teenagers. And we wanted to create a place that was for a little bit older guys my age, guys who had slowed down emotionally a little bit, weren't on Bumble all the time, although that's not 100% true. But guys who had slowed down. And what I did is I went and found a house that I would want to live in, and set up a set of standards that I would want to live in. That if for some reason, even at 26 years sober, if I was forced into sober living, would this be a good place for me? And that's what we made. We made a house that's very comfortable, spread out, and with older clients. We don't take people under the age of 25, typically. Now, we've made exceptions to that. When the treatment center or the therapist has said to us, hey, this guy really works better amongst older people, and we've taken them at their word. So we've had, I think in the time we've been open, 3 people under the age of 25, and that's had mixed outcomes, but so does
Right.
everyone. We all know that when people come into recovery, there's mixed outcomes, and it wasn't because of their age if there was a problem.
So tell us a little bit about what the daily schedule looks like for a newcomer to the house pre-COVID, because we're walking through this. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a philosophy that is probably born from all of the institutions I went to, and what an incredible rebel I was. I went to some very good places. I really did. Looking back, it's like kind of when you're a parent, you realize as years pass what good parents you had. Well,
Right.
I realized that being in recovery, what good institutions I went into, and I didn't do well there. And one of the main reasons I didn't do well is I went into institutions where I was immediately put on restrictions. That was probably appropriate for me, but I did not react well to it. I felt like I'm already in trouble and I haven't done anything. So when we have people come in, we sit down with them when we go over our rules and guidelines, and these are basically good neighbor, good fences. And what we're really trying to do is get these guys acclimated to the 12-step fellowships. Now, at our house, it is a requirement that you work the 12 steps from the Big Book with the Big Book sponsor. That doesn't mean that you can't go to other fellowships, but it is a requirement at our house. It doesn't have to be AA. It can be CA, HA, DAA, any of those fellowships. But we require that, and we very quickly begin to monitor people's step work. So they immediately have to start going to meetings around us, get a sponsor. I help people get sponsors, people that I know are going to put them in the book, give them written assignments, and we monitor those assignments immediately. We keep track of the guys, obviously, but we give them a lot of freedom. And when restrictions at our house begin, once you start showing us that you aren't doing well with the freedom.
Right. Yeah.
And I think everyone can agree that people who need to be watched 24 hours a day probably aren't ready for sober living, at least the type of sober living that we do. We're ready for the people who are ready to launch and need some accountability, need the drug and alcohol testing. And so, again, there are higher levels of care in sober living, and I wouldn't call ours a lower level of care necessarily. We just kind of keep those opportunities for disciplining people till we feel like we need them.
I enjoyed visiting with you before Spotlight, and I really liked hearing that you have a home that has a dedicated manager who's there 24/7 pretty much. I mean, that's his job, right?
Yes. So one of the houses is one of those. Both of the guys have the freedom to leave. But we did the second house, we got a manager who would be there all the time. In a lot of ways, we lucked into it. We found a guy who's been sober a long time who actually came to me right when we were getting ready to open up and said, hey, listen, I want to be more involved in recovery, and I love what I hear you're doing. And it was like God placed Mike into our laps, and it gave us an opportunity to have 2 types of houses. One where the manager went to work during the day from like 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., and one where the manager was there all of the time. And we, depending on what the discharge planners at the treatment centers we work with ask for and what they think this person needs, is how we kind of differentiate which house to put the person in.
Well, I like hearing that. So, is there a lot of family communication?
Yes.
At Recovered Connections?
Yes. And I probably the one thing that has been the most eye-opening to me, and Eric, you may already know what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
But being in recovery for so long and sponsoring so many people, I've had very limited contact with family members, parents and even spouses. Owning a facility like this where, typically the family's involved in pain and they want to know what's going on. I've had more interaction with the family than I've ever had during this time. And it has really been in coming to events where great speakers, like I was at the TAP event where your speaker from Burning Tree came and broke down why Burning Tree was what it was. And it was very illuminating to me because it made me understand Burning Tree. I've been to Burning Tree many times to speak, but I didn't really understand the philosophy behind it. But anyway,
Right.
going to those events, probably 50% of the speakers at recovery business events are talking about the family unit. And there's a reason for it, because it's not just the alcoholic who needs to get help. And so being able to talk with mom and dad and wife and brother about, hey, listen, I understand that we need to talk about our client, but I also want you to know that if you're not participating in your recovery from this, then you are lessening the chances for there to be success here. And being able to have those conversations, not accusatory conversations, more kind of a loving, hey, everyone needs to get better here. So
Right.
it's.
So I really like the fact that you're communicating with them and you're painting a picture of what the reality is on the ground. I really like expand what you were talking about. You guys get involved with the steps. So basically you're holding your clients accountable. You're verifying that what they say they're doing, they're actually doing. Is that right?
Yes, I push for, and if I have to, and the house managers push for sponsors who give written assignments. I got sober with written assignments. You know, when we read Bill's, the doctor's opinion, I wrote an assignment about my experience with the allergy, the abnormal reaction to alcohol. When we read Bill's story, I wrote my story, which was basically my decline into the inevitable progression of alcoholism. And so we want them to have sponsors that are giving them tangible written assignments. And our house managers meet with everyone in their prospective houses each week and look at that with them to make sure that's happening. If that's not happening, we talk to them about, you know, your sponsor may not want to work the steps, you know, this way. So maybe we need to get you with another sponsor who does that. And basically the reason is because until I started doing that, until Mike and Jared, our house managers, starting to do that, they weren't staying sober. So we're just trying to use the house as a way to pass on what worked for us. And we're not intrusive. I don't read people's 4 steps.
Right.
You know, we just make sure it's happening.
Yeah. What do you think? You guys have been open almost 2 years.
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. What do you think your average stay is? How long?
Oh, gosh. I would have to do statistics for that. I mean, we have a couple guys that have been in the house 9-10 months.
Yes.
And we've had people, you know, we can't force people to stay. We recommend 90 days just because of the science behind what makes sober living effective and letting your brain turn back on so that you can make decisions and be fully aware and all the stuff that happens. Again, I've seen so much of this going to these professional events and hearing speakers talk about how the brain works. We recommend to the families 90 days in the sober living. Typically we get that from people, except in the situations, you know, you kind of have to remove the statistics of people who go out and relapse and leave the house. But of the guys who stay sober, I would say probably 3 to 5 months would be average.
So the culture that you create with you and your house managers, the culture is what attracts these men to stay with you longer. I liked hearing that you're not forcing them to, or you're not. It's just it's through attraction, not promotion.
And I tell you, Eric, this is no BS. I leave those houses sometimes and sit in my car and start crying because I've been in a house where guys who are dying of this disease are cooking together and laughing together and eating together. And you know, some of the older guys especially who have become shut off from their families and completely isolated and are hanging out and laughing and watching ball games. And I mean, it is amazing the culture that has created itself. I didn't create it. All we tried to do was set up a place where people could learn and engage in recovery and do it together. And we try to keep the place as safe as we can. And but really the beautiful part about it is the relationships that develop between the guys.
Well, I know Burning Tree Programs. I know Gary Kaufman. I know that we enjoy when we hear that that a gentleman is coming back to the Dallas area and wanting to go up to Recovered Connections. We know that they are going to receive and get to put into practical application what they've been given so freely while they were in treatment. So
Yeah,
I can't thank you enough for coming on Burning Tree Programs Spotlight. And we're very grateful for what you do and what your organization provides here in the DFW area for men to live a recovered life.
Eric, thank you so much. It was great being with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. Well, thank you, Gary Kaufman, for bringing Mr. Greenleaf on and Recovered Connections in Frisco, Texas. Burning Tree Programs, again, has been around since 1999. We are a family-owned organization. David Elliott created us in 1999, as I said. Burning Tree Ranch was the initial program. It is a long-term drug and alcohol treatment center for men and women. Average length of stay is 8 to 14 months with a year of transitions. In 2004, David created Burning Tree Lodge. Burning Tree Lodge is outside of Austin and Elgin, Texas. It is now known as Renewal Lodge by Burning Tree. It is a clinically advanced mindfulness approach to the 12 steps. It is an in-network provider for all major insurance companies in the United States. Earlier this year, created with Jessica and Josh Slay, they rekindled the process, Awakening's Hill Country. It's a women helping women, trauma-informed treatment center for women to engage in a life of freedom. And in Tucson, Arizona, where David Elliott created Burning Tree West, David Elliott found his path of freedom in Tucson. Burning Tree West is a young adult program for men and women. It has a collegiate track, and it is also available, has sober living environment for men and women. Give us a call. Burning Tree, our mission is creating a life of excellence beyond sobriety through love and service. And I'm very honored that you took the time to watch Burning Tree Program Spotlight. Enjoy the rest of your day.